Hi, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Julie Lafford, Executive Director for Alumni Engagement at York University. I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you in the audience, whether this is your first time joining us for Scholars Hub at Home or if you've joined us before. I want to send a special thanks to those of us who previously registered for this event, and which we had to cancel at the last minute due to technical issues. I'm really glad to see you back. This webinar is part of our Scholars Hub speaker series, which features timely, relevant, and current educational lectures by academics and researchers from York. We're really pleased to be able to bring this lecture series online at this time to allow even more alumni to hear from some of the university's leading scholars. Before we begin, I want to tell you about a really important and engaging discussion in last week's special edition of Scholars Hub at Home. The lecture is titled, "Will This Be the One? Reflection, Engagement, and Action Against Anti-Black Racism in Ontario." If you haven't seen it already, please do so. I highly recommend it. And you can find it on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/YorkUalumni. And tomorrow, Friday the 19th, we'll be hosting a special follow-up to that event. And this one's titled Reflection, Engagement, and Action Against Anti-Black Racism in Ontario, Part 2. And it's taking place live at noon. We hope to see you there for that. I also encourage you to read President Lenton's most recent statement on York's response to anti-Black racism, which my colleague will post a link in the chat feature to that really soon. And I also see a link for tomorrow's registration too. Although we aren't all in the same location, we recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of the university. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It's now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. Now I'd like to take a quick poll asking whether you've ever attended a York event before today. It should pop up on your screen right now, and I'll give you a moment to respond. Great, thanks everyone for participating in that poll. It's wonderful to have so many of you here today. For those of you who haven't joined one of our virtual lectures before, welcome back. And I see that, yes, indeed, 79% of you have attended a lecture before. Welcome. And for those of you who have not, I'm glad to see you, and I hope you enjoy the content. If any of you need any help with the Zoom platform, feel free to click on that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. Our team is working in the background and here to help you. That same button can be used to submit questions for our speaker during the Q&A period following the talk. And for those of you watching live on Facebook, feel free to submit any questions or comments through the comment section for this video, and the team will send them my way. Today's talk is titled Countermeasures to Supply Chain Disruptions Associated with COVID-19 Over the Long Term, featuring Fuminori Toyasaki, who's the Associate Professor in the School of Administrative Studies. As I mentioned, we originally had Professor Toyosaki on the schedule earlier this month, but because of some technical issues, we rescheduled to today. I'm so pleased that you're here with us, Dr. Toyosaki. Dr. Toyosaki has been conducting research in the area of sustainable supply chain designs, including environmental and disaster and emergency issues. His current research interests include supply chain designs in disasters, emergencies, interaction between finance and humanitarian supply chains, and supply chain risk management. His works have been published in leading academic journals, and he's sat on numerous boards throughout his career. And today, he is joining us from Vienna. Welcome, Dr. Toyosaki. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to you now, please, for your lecture.
Thank you very much. Can I start?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for providing me with this opportunity to introduce my research project. Okay, wait, please. Can I change the slide? I don't know, how can I change? Okay. Okay, so this research project is supported by the Canadian Institute of Health Research, CIHR. Okay. And then currently we are working with Professor Solis, Professor Asghari, and postdoctoral research fellow Faragara from New York University, and from Vienna University of Economics Business, Professor Wackolbinger. Okay. So this slide actually briefly summarizes today's presentation. Okay. First, I overview the unique points of supply chain disruptions caused by the COVID-19. Okay. And then I briefly explain about the objective of this research project supported by the CIHR. Okay. And then in this research project, okay, we show that two countermeasures for the supply chain disruptions, looking back to the previous relevant cases and also current cases. Okay. And then, but these countermeasures is not perfect. Okay. So we recognize the challenges. So I pointed out challenges. And then next one, the solution approaches to overcome the challenges, okay, to implement the countermeasures, okay, in reality. Okay. But this research project is still ongoing, so I cannot show a specific result of this research project. But in this presentation, I mainly focus on explaining or sharing with you the gained insight of this supply chain disruptions and our research objectives. Okay? And I also want to explain why we think it's important. Okay, this research objective. Okay, so first I briefly summarize the unique points of supply chain disruptions. So compared with the previous supply chain disruptions, okay, most unique point is a kind of this is a disruption of both supply and demand. Okay. Okay, so yeah, for example, okay, and also as you can see, you still remember, the United States tried to restrict the exports of M3M masks to Canada. Okay, so again, the demand for the medical equipment, okay, increased significantly. Okay, but supply side capacity cannot catch up this significant increase of demand. Okay? That's why relatively many countries start imposing export restrictions of medical products. Okay? And also recently, some countries start easing the lockdown. Okay? But some medical experts also slightly concerned about second wave and the third wave of pandemic may happen. Okay, of course, this kind of second wave, third wave pandemic also affect the supply chains. Okay? So the countermeasure I introduced try to take into account these kind of aspect. Okay. Okay, so here's a small brief summary of objective of this research project. First, okay, collecting qualitative or quantitative data, we try to understand how supply chains were disrupted because of COVID-19. Okay. And then actually, we propose two countermeasures. Okay, one is a stock transshipment system. Okay, via supply chain platform. Another one, supply chain restructuring. Okay? But these, when you implement these countermeasures, actually, of course, there are some kind of challenges. Okay? So our research goal is actually try to mitigate these challenges or try to resolve the challenges, okay, for implementing these countermeasures. Okay? So to show the solution for resolving the challenges, to implement the countermeasures, actually, we using a game theoretic models, and then we try to develop guidelines how to overcome challenges. Okay, okay. So today's main topics mainly first two parts, but yeah, I briefly also talk about third part. Okay. Okay. So actually, if you if you read the textbook of supply chain risk management, okay, their countermeasures for supply chain disruptions actually should satisfy these 4 aspects, 4 points. Okay, first, that countermeasures should increase the visibility. Okay, which means the companies or makers, the manufacturers, makers should map their supply chains. Supply chains. Okay, so which means you should know the first tier, second tier, third tier, fourth tier. Okay, for example, automakers case, they have 19 to 12 tiers of suppliers. Okay, they should know all suppliers. Okay, situation, the inventory levels, where's the factories, and so on. Okay, but at the same time, by using by mapping, they should monitor the key risk indicators of supply chain disruptions. Okay, on the real-time basis. Okay? Another aspect of countermeasures should satisfy the building appropriate slack in the system, okay? Which means can be achieved by increasing inventory level or capacity of production capacity and so on. And then next aspect is the flexibility. Okay, you should companies should try to use standardized parts. Okay, by doing so, even if one supplier get disrupted, okay, you can relatively easily to find the alternative parts suppliers. But at the same time, if you use standardized parts, the makers may need to sacrifice, may need to give up product competitiveness or product discrimination against rival makers. Okay? Also, similar way, if you have extra inventory, they need to bear extra inventory cost. Okay, that pros and cons trade-off, right? Okay, and the contingency planning. Okay, so before disaster occurs, the supply chain disruption occurs, the company should identify or analyze possible alternatives or possible risks. Okay? So taking into account these 4 aspects, countermeasures should satisfy. Okay, we propose 2 countermeasures for supply chain disruptions currently caused by the COVID-19. Okay, these countermeasures. Okay, we also look into the previous supply chain disruption cases and also current cases. Okay. First countermeasure we try to show is a stock transshipment system, okay, via supply chain platform. Okay. Actually, this system currently is not so prevalently introduced in the private sectors, but in the non-profit sectors, actually this system has already been implemented, okay, for the disaster emergency. Okay. So I briefly talk about about these systems, okay, using this slide. Okay, for example, this case, this figure shows the 3 parties: suppliers, maker I, maker J. Okay, and each to make this system works well, okay, each party in the supply chains, okay, should be connected, should be communicated on the IT platform or blockchain something. Okay. So before the disruption occurs, maker I, maker J can procure the parts or ingredients from suppliers without any problem, as the dotted arrow shows. Okay? But once the disruption occurs, most likely maker I, maker J cannot procure parts or ingredients from suppliers. Okay? So in that case, maker I, let's say maker I has a shortage of stock of parts or ingredients, okay? But maker J has an excess stock of parts or ingredients. Okay, so maker I, in that case, if they maker I, maker J join this system, maker I can borrow or procure the parts or ingredients from maker J. Okay, by doing so, maker I can relatively easily to resolve the shortage of stock. The maker J, can resolve the excess stock. Okay? Again, to make this system work, okay, each member's inventory levels can be monitored, okay, on real time. Okay, so again, this system is not so prevalently, it's not so popular still in the private sectors. Okay? But next slide shows, United Nations has already implemented this system. Okay? In this case, member parties actually aid non-profit sectors. Okay? Okay. UNHRD, United Nations Humanitarian Response Depot Network, use this system. And recently, after COVID-19, okay, Taiwanese government, okay, I read the newspaper article, okay, set up an open access IT platform of pharmacies inventory of masks. Okay, so by doing so, the consumers they can successfully reduce the mismatch between the suppliers of masks and the consumers, okay, of masks. Okay. And then also the Japanese case, this is still experimental stage. Okay, again, because pharmaceutical sectors, okay, introduce this system, and then they use a blockchain platform, and then they successfully reduce excess stock, also resolved a shortage of stock in each pharmacy's inventory of medicines. Okay, how about the manufacturing sectors? Actually, okay, previously, after the Fukushima meltdown in 2011, okay, you may still remember, Japanese automakers tried to introduce this kind of a system. Actually, this system, okay, introduction of this system led by the Japanese government, okay, but unfortunately it failed, okay, because to make this stock transshipment system, okay, just now I mentioned, okay, to make this system work well, actually the parts or ingredients, okay, or product transshipped between the makers should be standardized as much as possible. Okay, otherwise this kind of transshipment between the makers is impossible. So, but if you do so, the automakers, okay, need to sacrifice their product competitiveness. That indeed, actually, automakers, okay, were concerned about losing their own product competitiveness. Similarly, part suppliers, okay, also concerned about the price cutting war, okay, because they cannot discriminate their own parts, because supplied parts is from the rival parts suppliers. Okay, that's why this doesn't work well. So so this is a kind of challenging part to implement this system. Okay. Okay, next countermeasures. This is supply chain restructuring, okay, via source diversification. Okay. Okay, so already some business people or the business owners mentioned, oh, you shouldn't invest now for the restructuring supply chains, okay, because people eventually forget about the current, okay, disruption after the pandemic. So then people, the customers, return to the purchase the cheaper product. Okay, but actually, if you look carefully, actually some governments have already, okay, announced supply chain restructuring. Okay, for example, U.S. and Japan. Okay, other governments also start seriously thinking, okay, especially for strategic industry, okay, that do not have to rely on the foreign supply chains. Okay, for example, the Canadian case, maybe medical mask. Okay, okay, so the further supply chain restructuring, which is included diversification of supply sources and or shifting the domestic production. Okay, okay, so Canadian government has not officially announced these strategies, but some experts, Canadian experts, already mentioned we should seriously think about this supply chain restructuring. Okay, especially medical areas. Okay? In Canadian medicine, completely rely on the single source suppliers, okay, which is located in China or India. Okay. This is very vulnerable against the disaster and the pandemic. Okay. But this is not, okay, supply chain restructuring, it's not easy going also strategy. Okay. First of all, you need to think about product types. What type of product you should produce, okay, in Canada, okay, instead of the some East Asian country, okay. If you are shifting production from Asian country to here, maybe you need to give up a cheap price product, okay, which means that you need to produce a superior or high value added products. Okay, but in this case, okay, most likely you need to use a highly customized, high tech, okay, parts and materials. Okay. Of course, okay. So for example, currently, okay, medical mask is imported from China, okay, for the relatively reasonable price. Okay. But because of very high air tightness, currently, okay, if doctors use this kind of a medical mask for 8 hours, 6 hours for surgery, they easily feel tired. Okay? But if you can successfully develop a medical mask, which makes their breathe, okay, doctor the breath, okay, much easier. Yeah, maybe they pay extra amount of money, okay, for this. Yeah? But if you do so, actually, if you want to develop this kind of stuff, you need to secure the suppliers. Okay, okay. For example, in Canada, okay, no mask material suppliers exist that has technology to produce materials for medical masks. Okay, so you need to develop. Okay, but it's not easy. Okay, quality and so on. Okay. Also, for business contingency, you should consider second sources for the future supply chain disruption. Okay? Again, like if you use special materials, it's more difficult to find the second sources. Okay? So, incentive from possible incentives, okay, this kind of question may naturally raise. Okay? How can you part and or material supplies investment in innovative parts and or materials be in use? Okay, so far I introduced two countermeasures in the long term, okay, kind of perspective for this countermeasure for the supply chain disruptions. So, what's the common issue for these two countermeasures just now explained, okay, just now introduced? Okay? So this slide, next slide, that is briefly summarize, explain about what the issue we should consider. Okay? So let's say that this is this arrow represents the degree of parts customization or degree of quality. Okay? So left part represents low degree, the right part high. So degree of part customization, part quality, okay, becomes higher toward the right. Okay, okay, part suppliers. Okay, if part suppliers, okay, try to produce high quality or high customized parts, they need to bear the extra cost for investment. But if you can successfully develop this kind of this kind of materials, they may increase the negotiation power against the makers. Okay? Okay, so maker side, okay, if they can produce a high value added product using the high quality, high customized parts or materials, okay, the makers can increase the margins. Okay? Okay, but may increase the risk of supply chain disruption because okay, if you use a highly customized parts or quality, okay, it's more difficult to find a second source, okay, suppliers. Okay, okay, so anyway, the makers, suppliers need to make a deal, okay, make a deal for to make a business. Okay, so but again, each each party in the supply chain pursues its own interest. Okay. So without doing any kind of incentive control for each parties, okay, resulting deal, okay, resulting level of degree of parts customization quality, okay, which is called the equilibrium in the game theoretic technical term, might be here, okay, equilibrium here. Okay. This equilibrium point of a degree of parts customization quality, okay, most likely is not a social optimum, okay, or a system optimum level of degree of part customization, part quality, okay, or material quality. Okay, so the collaborative case, if the maker suppliers, okay, can successfully collaborate this, they are achieving, okay, resulting degree of part customization called the system optimum level, degree of quality. Okay, here is a gap. There's a gap between this. So our research tried to, okay, reduce this gap. Okay, which kind of measure, okay, can reduce the gap. Okay, again, supplier and makers, okay, make a contract and negotiation. Okay, so which kind of mechanism, okay, to reduce the gap. Okay, so solution approach, okay, using our game theoretic model, we try to show the guideline, okay, to design a contract or negotiation between the part or ingredient suppliers and the makers to achieve a social optimum part quality and customization, okay, for the supply chain, okay, restructuring and so on. Okay. Okay, so this is okay our research, my research objective, okay, on the approach. Okay. That's it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Toyosaki.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Members of the audience, now is time for you to go ahead and pose any questions you have for our lecturer today. I'm going to kick things off by asking, whether you think we're going to be better prepared for a second wave of COVID-19 than we were the first time around. Do you think that we'll be better prepared from a supply chain management position? Will we be better prepared for a second wave of COVID-19?
Yes, yes. So that's why, okay, like as I mentioned, okay, second wave, third wave case, most likely I suggest this kind of a stock transshipment system, okay, because the second wave, third wave also most likely, okay, occurs, okay, different timing in the regions, okay, in terms of magnitude of timing. So, so actually, the stock transshipment system, okay, just now I mentioned, okay, take advantage of different timing of supply and demand, okay, in the different regions. Because now, okay, second wave pandemic, third wave pandemic, okay, may occur in different regions. Currently, for example, South America, okay, Brazil and Mexico has a big problem. But now China start opening factories. Right? So if you have this kind of a stock transshipment system, you most likely you could okay, some parts, some factories may have extra stock, but some factory may not have enough stock. In that case, you can exchange some stock.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I have another question for you. So in some countries, there is a concern that due to the shortage of masks and ventilators, there's a sudden massive production of these products, creating overstock. So what kind of countermeasures do you think would be effective for overstock problems?
Yeah. So this case also like that stock transshipment system works well. Okay. So the stock transshipment systems can resolve the stock transport from the party with excess stock to the party with shortage stock, right? So now the seriously thinking about this kind of stuff. Okay, at least each country should set up some kind of a IT platform, and each country or each companies can always access to the stock level for each countries or each companies. Then you can easily recognize of which country or which company has excess stock of ventilator, excess masks. And then the companies or countries which facing the shortage of stock, can borrow or procure these products. Right? Yeah.
So that is an effective counter.
Yeah, and actually, United Nations has this kind of system. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have a related question actually from Michael Michelli. Michael asks, should Canada pursue greater economic or leadership integration with the United States as a countermeasure to any potential supply chain disruptions?
Yeah, actually, no, it's some part of the political aspect, right? But I personally think, okay, from during this pandemic, I feel okay. You shouldn't rely on too much on the U.S. Okay, so I think Canada also seriously thinking about producing the like a very strategic product, so develop strategic industries, which shouldn't rely on too much other countries. Okay, so yeah, of course we cannot ignore the American economies and industries, but we should develop our own suppliers, or sources and so on. Okay, that's why the second countermeasure part I showed how can you develop the new source suppliers in Canada or in other areas. Okay, for example, currently in many cases we rely too much on the Chinese suppliers, but even if you shift the suppliers from China to Southeast Asian countries, you need to develop, you need to train new suppliers, right? So in that case, you need to give some kind of incentive to meet the quality you expect. Okay. So yeah, you shouldn't. Yeah, you shouldn't rely on too much on the other countries. So much, yeah, but at the same time, you cannot ignore the globalism. Okay, but pros and cons. But yeah.
Right. Sounds like it's a very complicated answer.
Complicated, yeah.
So we have time for just one more question, Dr. Toyasaki. Leopold Koff asks, in future, assuming that new pandemics may occur again, should organizations build an extra line item for cost of goods sold to offset planning and absorbing the costs of offset planning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which means that you mean the government should subsidize or something like that?
Well, Leopold says organizations building an extra line item for COGS. And I believe what is meant here is this is some sort of contingency budget line. And Leopold, if I haven't got that right, if you could comment and correct me, that would be great.
You mean the contingency planning? So each the government should encourage companies to prepare the contingency planning and so on, like this kind of stuff.
Yes, that's exactly.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Anyway, supply chain management is kind of a strategy issue rather than tactic issue. So I think before some disruption or disaster occurs, okay, actually companies should prepare, okay, for future possible supply chain disruptions, right? So once disaster or something happened, pandemic occurred, okay, then they try to react. Sometimes it's too late. So okay, so before the pandemic occurred, they should prepare. Okay, they should prepare the system and so on. It's more strategic issue. But okay, the companies always tend to be busy for the day-to-day businesses. So this kind of supply chain restructuring and so on is kind of a long-term issue. So the companies always postpone the supply chain restructuring and so on. Okay. But yes, similar kind of stuff can be applied to the non-profit sector's case.
Mm-hmm.
So non-profit case, similar way. The fund donors, donors get not so interested in the donating money to the supply chain infrastructure because it's not vivid. Okay, maybe shareholders may have similar kind of incentive. Okay, they really want to have a short-term returns from the business profit, business activity. Right? So that's why companies tend to, or any kind of organization tend to postpone the supply chain management issue. So, but at the same time, okay, yeah, of course, they seriously think about this kind of contingency planning. Okay, and the second source and so on.
Great. Dr. Toyosaki, thank you. We're out of time, unfortunately, for Q&A.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your work with us. And I have a feeling we're going to be hearing a lot more about supply chain over the next 6 to 9 months. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Before I say goodbye to those of you in the audience, I want to thank you again for taking the time to join us today. And I have one last poll for you. And this question really helps inform our events moving forward and how we tailor them to you and your interests. So the question is, what's your interest in attending Scholars Hub at home over the summer months, July and August? Please take a moment and give us your response. This is really important to our short-term planning. And thank you for helping us out. Feel free to share today's talk with your friends. It'll be posted on our social media channels, so you can follow us at York Alumni on Twitter and Instagram. And you can also join our LinkedIn group, or follow us on Facebook. Just search York University Alumni. If you have feedback about this program, this talk, this lecture, or any of our programming, or have ideas for topics that you'd like us to cover, they are very welcome. Contact us at alumni@yorku.ca. And don't forget to join us tomorrow for part 2 of Reflection, Engagement, and Action Against Anti-Black Racism in Ontario. Finally, next week on June 24th, we will have another COVID-themed lecture about the impact of COVID-19 on the lives of people experiencing homelessness. And I hope to see you all there. Thanks again for attending today's event. Stay safe and be well.